Good afternoon, guys. How are we doing today? Now, today's video, I just want us to take some introspection on the elections that have just happened in Zimbabwe. And my introspection is not going to be a political introspection, but it's going to be on the agenda that I deal with, which is the awakening of Africans agenda. So you guys have gone through these elections in Zimbabwe. Do you feel that democracy has been served? Do you feel that by definition, you as the ordinary Zimbabwean had an opportunity to pick the leader that you want out of your own society? Because by definition, what democracy is supposed to give us is that the normal man, the normal citizen, the publicus, as they would put it in Greek, are going to choose one of their peers from among themselves to go and represent them in the seats of governance. Is that what happened in Zimbabwe? Is that what was achieved in Zimbabwe over the past week? Was democracy served? For me, it's very important for us to answer these questions because as Africans, we are regularly caught up in these European systems on the belief that they're going to work for us and they're going to serve us and they're going to allow us to be able to develop. So we want to try and see in a very short period of time, do we feel that democracy in this case was served, and do we feel it is going to advance us as a nation? The first question I'd like to ask is that in an electoral process like what took place, when we are electing members of parliament together with the president, do you feel that the MPs that were chosen, the MPs that were put forward, come from the people? Do they come from the people sufficiently such that when people elect them, those people are going to go and represent their interests in parliament? Does an MP use the same transport, the same hospitals, the same public facilities as the people that he's representing? Do his children go to the same schools as those people that he's representing? For those people to then say democracy was served by one of our own going into parliament to serve our interests. Number two, the people that elect a leader to go to the legislature to look after their interests, do they have enough knowledge on how the system works, what the system is about, and what is important in the system and what needs to change in the system for them to be able to have what it is that is going to benefit them? Does this system, do the people who are voting have the knowledge to elect an official that is going to serve their interests? Do they have the knowledge about education, about the food system, about farming, industry, economics, to be able to choose a leader who is going to be able to talk to economic, education, health policies to bring them the changes that they are looking for? And then finally, when a person goes into the legislature, when they go to parliament, do they have the power to influence the lives of the people that have elected them in order to deliver value to these people? These are important questions that sometimes as Africans, we don't think about. We've been told that democracy works, but we've never tried to understand how this democracy really works and if it can deliver results to us. So the issue of the legislature that I'm asking you, the issue of parliament, can parliament deliver that which the people are looking for? Can parliament deliver value for the people that elect MPs to go to parliament? Now, from my understanding, my limited understanding of governance, I understand that there are three branches to government. The legislature is one, the presidency, and then we've also got something that we call the judiciary. So when we elect a person to go into parliament, can that person who has gone into parliament have sufficient enough say to be able to determine a good outcome in the economy? Can the person that's in legislature influence the presidency and the judiciary to be able to ensure that the nation is delivering what they need? Do the people that we put into parliament have adequate knowledge of the system and how it works to be able to deliver value for us? I'm going to argue and say no. The three pillars are so separate that it becomes very difficult for someone that I've put into legislature, someone I voted for as an MP, to come in and deliver sufficient laws to be able to push the changes that I require in my life. In the Zimbabwean election, for instance, I never heard anybody talking about the seeds that we use, so no one talked about what kind of seeds we want. No one talked about whether we want GMOs, whether we want fertilizers and chemicals in our food. Nobody talked about the water systems and the control of those water systems. Nobody talked about land tenure and who is supposed to own the land. All those issues were not spoken about. To me, they are important. No one told me who is going to control my reserve bank. No one told me who's going to be creating my debt, who's going to be creating my money, printing my money, and printing my coins. No one told me that. And for me, that's what matters. But does the person in the rural areas, the person in Harare, think about the things that I'm thinking about? And are they going to elect the person that is going to think about these issues? Because as far as I'm concerned, we have been told that in a democracy, we've got three branches, which is supposed to be the legislature, presidency, and the judiciary. But I'm going to tell you that the judiciary has got more power than the legislature. I'll explain to you why. The legislature is only but one branch of the law of a land. Most laws in most lands are extracted from at least 5 sources. They're extracted from the previous laws that existed. They're extracted from Roman, Dutch law, English law, a lot of times here in Africa. They're extracted from a constitution that is usually not African, a constitution that is usually created with consultation with international forces and not our people. And then it is also constituted from what we call precedents, the decisions that have been made by judges over the years that have created the laws and have created new laws. And then the legislature is the 5th. So we've got 4 law sources that create the law of a land in which legislature is just one. That tells me that my judiciary, with these other 4 extra sources of law, actually runs my nation and even runs my legislature much more than my legislature runs the nation. Much more than my legislature influences the judiciary. And my judiciary then also influences my president. But there is an arm that is missing that no one talks about. For there to be a judiciary, for there to be a president, for there to be a parliament and a legislature in which people are paid salaries, somebody must pay these people, somebody must put money to make these institutions stand. My question is, who is that somebody? And the truth of the matter is that somebody is the bank. The banking system is the one that ensures that there's money to run a legislature, to run a presidency, and to run a judiciary. This is also where capitalism comes in that taxes are the ones that ensure that we've got a presidency, a judiciary, and also a legislature. So now my legislature is paid by somebody that we did not elect into power. My president is paid for by money that we do not think about and do not elect into power. But I would argue that the person who pays my legislator, the person who pays my judge, the person who pays my president has got more power than all 3. And I would even argue that that person who pays my president, my legislature, is the same person that is also going to ensure whether my government has got money to run. He's got money to have hospitals, has got money to build roads, has got money to build schools. Who is that person that has so much power to pay my president, to pay my legislature, to pay my judges, and at the same time also determine whether there's going to be money in the fiscus for the schools to be built? That is the banker. The banker that you and I do not elect. The banker that you never thought about when you went to elections. The banker that has been affecting Zimbabwe's future for the past 17 years with sanctions. You never thought about that person, but that's the person that's running our nation. That's the person that is actually determining whether Zimbabwe is working or not. Now my question is, then does democracy work if the 3 branches that have been put up for us, and we only elect one branch, and that one branch is subservient to the judiciary, and my judiciary is subservient to a banker, a banking elite, and money class that determines whether the country is going to function or not. My question to you is, does democracy work? Do you even understand what democracy is? And if you do not vote for the banker that puts the money, if you do not vote for the banker that determines whether your country is going to work, if you do not vote for the banker that determines whether your government is going to have a fiscus to deliver services, then who is really running your country? And does this democracy that you were voting for over these days, this democracy that some people were dying for, does it really work? And as Africans, have you really thought about this system? Have you really thought whether this system works? Or you're just following it because your masters, your colonizers, told you to follow it? Because if my judges have more power than my legislature, if the laws that have been made in the past have more power than my legislature, if the Roman Dutch law that was made in Rome and London way before, if international conventions that have been built into my constitution mean more than the laws that my legislatures are going to make, if my legislators are going to make laws that are influenced by international law, which happens to be colonial law, my question is, can they give me what I want as a citizen? If my legislator cannot influence international bankers, international investors, and the money class or capitalists that determine the taxes and the amount of money and fiscus, the FDI that comes into my country to run my country, if they can't influence those, my question is, why did we go and vote this whole week? Why did you waste your time going to vote? And then the last question I'm going to ask you, these money classes, these bankers, these people that run the nation without us knowing that they're running the nation, in the result of what has happened in Zimbabwe today, how much influence did they have on the Zimbabwean election? How much influence did they exert, these financial class, these bankers, these investors who actually really pay our judges, legislature, and president? How much influence did they have on this election? These are the questions you don't want to talk about. These are the questions in all the analysis that we have before elections we don't discuss, but I want to discuss that. How much influence do these people who make our country run, who we don't elect, how much influence did they have on the outcome of this election? And these legislatures that you put in parliament, the ones that are paid bigger salaries than the people they represent in the rural areas, the people they represent in the townships, these people who then move out of the townships and go and live in suburbs, are they really going to take care of the interests of the people that they're supposed to be representing? Do they still represent you? Does an MP still represent you when they're earning a huge salary every single month? They've got a car, they've got a cell phone, and probably a house paid for by the taxpayer. Do they still represent you when you're in the rural areas living in poverty? When you're in the township living in poverty? When you're selling on the streets, do they still represent you? And the fact that they are being paid by the fiscus that is created by capitalists and bankers, whose interests do you think they cater for? I'm asking these questions because I'm trying to challenge you as Africans. You talk about democracy, you talk about your participation in governance, but you never realize that when democracy was created, when it was created in Greece, it was never intended to give the public power. It was intended to give the elite power, but an elite that is going to be empowered by the public to think that the public has a say. When it was then reenacted again during the French Revolution, it was never intended to give the power to the public. It was actually intended to give power to the bourgeoisie class, because this is when capitalism came up. Capitalism created this so-called democracy. It created this democracy to remove the monarchs. But not only to remove the monarchs, but to ensure that it gives people sufficient belief that they are participating in democracy so that they don't overthrow the bourgeoisie and the monarchy in future. This is history that we don't read. Yet it is sitting there. Then we say we are Democrats. We're practicing democracy without understanding what democracy is. We're practicing democracy by electing a president and a legislature, yet they've got a judiciary that makes laws that bind everybody else, without necessarily being answerable to these other two branches. How is that delivery of democracy? How is that the people ruling? How is that people electing people from their own communities, peers, to go and represent them in parliament? We are colonized. And it's about time that we start thinking about the colonial systems that have been left, that continue to colonize us, that continue to give us a semblance of independence, yet our nations are still governed. Our nations are still under the influence of colonizers through capital. Our nations are still governed by people that we do not elect, that are sitting in London, New York, and China. These are the things we should discuss as Africans. We call ourselves educated, but we follow systems that don't work for us. We follow laws that were made by Europeans for Europeans. We have continued to carry through the laws that were used to colonize us. We've used international law, which is the law of discovery, to continue to rule over us, yet it was the law that was utilized to colonize us. And we expect this governance system to deliver value for us. It's insanity. And what happens is our political analysts won't discuss what I'm discussing. They will continue to give you the impression that this dud that is called democracy is for us and it works for us. Yet it is a law of the elite. It is a law that gives judges and colonial laws, colonial courts, more power than your legislature's got power. And those colonial courts are answerable to people that sometimes don't even live in your own countries, who are the bankers, merchants, and commercial class, or what we call the bourgeoisie. I hope I'm going to sufficiently tickle your minds to start thinking about changing the system. Or at least when you're participating in a system that doesn't work, don't indict those people that choose not to participate in the system, because people like me who understand this system don't find a reason to vote when I'm going to elect people that have no power to change my life. And the one president that had the power to change our lives, Robert Mugabe, who actually made laws that go against the system of the outside, was punished and vilified for what he tried to do. He put power in the hands of the people. He put lands in the hands of the people. He put resources in the hands of the people. You don't even appreciate that, because you want the power to sit with the bankers. You want the power to sit with the people that write your paper money. A lot of you are more interested in having a paper currency than you are interested in yourselves producing gold in your own land. Some of you are willing to give away your mining rights and your gold because you want paper money to be written by international bankers and to be given strength by international bankers. Thank you guys for listening. I don't have much data, so I am going to leave it here. But I want you to think about what it is that you were doing over the past 2 weeks. You were voting for who? The person you voted for, do they have power? The person you voted for, who's going to get a huge salary every month in parliament, do they represent your interests when you are living in poverty? Do they represent your interests when their kids go to private schools and they don't attend the same community schools where your children attend? Do they have your interest at heart? When they don't use public transport because they've been given cars that are paid for by taxpayers' money, do they carry your interest? How can they carry your interest when they don't use the same public hospitals you use? How can they have your interest when they don't know what being in business is, what being jobless is? How can they know and understand your interest when they get tenders now because they are rubbing shoulders with influential people? How can they have your interest when they are paid by the bankers that you didn't elect, who actually affect your country much more than the leader that you've elected? Lastly, how do you think that the current president is going to deliver your dreams and aspirations? And do you believe that the other leader who lost, the one who has put your nation under sanctions and lobbied for sanctions for 17 years, would have served your interest had he gone into government? And is your interest having a job, having factories built in Zimbabwe, and then you have a minimum wage, while the resources of your nation are owned by foreigners? Do you believe that that would have delivered value for you? Good day.